Welcome to Lemonade Learning, a refreshing look at learning today. We serve up high-impact practical strategies alongside honest and energizing stories to help educators.
Make the most of your moments, lead and learn with purpose, and craft lifetime lemonade from the sweets and sours of education. Join us for a glass.
Hey everybody, it's Bree.
And Lainey, welcome. I'm really excited to have Joshua Stamper on. I know Bree is too. And one of the reasons I'm excited is because he's a podcaster and he's a very generous host. And I want to hear him talk more. He's so good at being very strategic about asking questions to his podcast guests, but I want to hear more from Josh. So I'm super excited that you're here. And just really quickly, for those who haven't had a chance to meet you yet, administrator, author, podcaster, we definitely want to talk about your upcoming book. That's super exciting. And so with that, just welcome. And I'll let Bree welcome you too.
Hey, Josh, welcome.
Thank you both. Long-time listeners, so it's amazing to be on the show with y'all.
First-time caller, here you go. I'm super
Here I
excited.
come.
All right, well, as you know, long-time listener, you know that as is appropriate, we like to ask you your sweet and sour. And so without further ado, let's hear it from the man. Tell us a little bit about this.
Well, it's a pretty exciting time. Tomorrow is actually my birthday, for one. But then second of all, this month here, I get to launch my book, and it's pretty exciting. So I like to start with the good, right? So I just got this copy the other day, so I got to look through it, and it's launching on September 21st. So I'm going to be releasing the book cover here and some more information on September 7th. But I'm giving you like the first glimpse of the book, and I get to talk about it a little bit with y'all. But super excited to get that out into the world, and hopefully it resonates with some folks and help them in their leadership journey.
Happy all the way around. So you'll have like your birthday and your book birthday all the same. And I almost, I'm going to spare everybody, but I did almost burst into the happy birthday song, but I feel like that we'd lose some people. So I'm going to spare everybody of that, but yes, happy birthday. I feel like there should be cake somewhere that we should pass around somehow, but.
I somehow managed to get a sneak peek at the book. And so spoiler alert, it's amazing. And I actually feel like not only did I get so much wisdom about leadership, but I actually really feel like I got to know you more, Josh, because you are very good about sharing about yourself in the book. So I'm excited for people to read. And this episode, hopefully, is scheduled to come out September 9th. We never commit to a date. That's the first time I've ever committed to a date. So, and I don't edit. So this, oh gosh. Okay. Hopefully September 9th, this episode is out. That means the pre-ordering for your book will already have started. So listeners, hit pause if you need to. Go grab your pre-order. Just saying. So, all right. So that's definitely sweet. Anything sour going on? It's such a loaded question. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I mean, we talked a little bit before we pushed record, and, you know, I've been in school for 3 weeks going on 4, and just to see everyone was super exciting, of course, to see everyone back in the schools. You know, we don't really have a virtual option. We do for like our 6th grade students, but it's very few. It's like 50 students that are doing virtual for those who are not able to be vaccinated. But then also what we're seeing is just a lot of anxiety, a lot of social discomfort and trauma and stress just coming back. And we knew that was going to be the case, but we're seeing it from all realms, right? We're seeing it from our teachers to our students, to our parents, and to our community. And I think it feels like we're later in the year than we really are, because everyone is just trying to get back into the routines again, trying to feel each other out. But then in addition, like the year that we've been gone, and a lot of our students were virtual last year, they've gone through a lot of trauma during that time. And we're starting to see the evidence of that in their behavior and the way that they're socializing and trying to work through it. And of course, I'm in a middle school, so already there's a lot of brain development going on, a lot of just growth in general in their body and in their mind. So I think that's been pretty stressful on everybody, just to try and work through that. And thankfully, our teachers are dedicated to like social emotional learning and trauma-informed practices, and they're trying to do their best. But I will say it's probably been more challenging to begin the school year than in years past. And so I'm just hoping that, you know, as a staff, we can just kind of maintain and be there for everybody as we move on through the year.
I would love it if you're comfortable with it, Josh. I'd love it if you shared a little bit about maybe advice that you have, because you do have an expertise in trauma-informed practices. I know that social emotional learning is a priority for you. So Megan Lawson had a blog post about foreboding joy. And it kind of really resonated with me. So it's like, yeah, I do have joy right now, but there's this feeling of like, wait, what's coming? This like, I don't know what's ahead kind of thing. So it's kind of, again, almost like I felt the whole 18, however many months we're on now, this like paradox of emotion where I'm like super happy, or maybe I'm super excited, but then there's just something kind of hanging over me. Like, I feel like the other shoe could drop any minute now. So,
yeah. So I think for this school year, working with our staff was just about making sure that the students had ownership in everything that we did. So like setting up good relationships, but then also like healthy expectations. Like, what does that look like? So there's a lot of different terms out there, treatment agreements, relationship agreements, whatever that may be, but making sure that our students understand what are our expectations, and the students get to like be part of that process of like what's student to student interactions, student to teacher, teacher to student, and really like building a plan that everyone agrees upon moving forward. And so we did that with all of our teachers, all of our classes, and we tried to space it out so not, a kid doesn't go through 8 periods a day with the exact same relationship agreement, and they're just beaten down with that. So teachers did it in different times, and we kind of spaced out in different activities so it wasn't redundant. But the main thing is like our students, for a lot of their lives and where they are growing up, they're being told what to do pretty much all day long by adults, and they don't really get a whole lot of ownership in their decisions. And then you add trauma in there for a student, and they really feel like they don't have any control in the situation. And so what we're trying to do is to allow the teacher to be a facilitator, to allow choice in their learning, but then also how they're building classroom expectations. So that's been a real big focus so far, in addition to like finding ways to do brain breaks. If it's 60 seconds, it's not going to take long within your lesson, but it still gives those opportunities for students to get to know each other, make connections with the teacher. You learn things. It gives them a chance to model how to communicate, how to listen, how to be respectful in that communication, and be healthy with everything that they're doing. So that's been kind of our big push right now is, yes, content is important, but it's not the end all be all. We need to make sure that our relationships are deep rooted. We know our students, and kind of breaking down that misconception of if a student is compliant in my class, I have a great relationship with them.
So one of the things that I am really curious about, and as you were talking through this and talking about working with your faculty and as an administrator, as a leader, are you seeing some similarities for the importance of those reminders of the trauma that our teachers have been experiencing as well? Because I think that, thinking about, Lainey, your comment about Megan's blog about that foreboding joy, one of the challenges that we have been experiencing, and in some ways, I think this fall kind of snuck up on everybody, right? Because we did lull down, and in a way, it's a little bit mirrored from last fall, where there was a lot of people who thought like, okay, spring was done and over with. And then we were supposed to be finished with that. And then, but at the same time, there was a lot of conversation kind of ramping up in those, in the final months of summer. This particular fall, I think there was, I really do feel like many people felt like the rug was pulled out from underneath them, as far as like, we, like many states around the country, the masks had been kind of removed from interaction in public and things like that. And so people had a lot of hope that, okay, great, now we're right back into it. And then all of a sudden, that's not the case. And it's almost like experiencing that trauma all over again. I know, Josh, both of us being in Texas has been really hard hit with the Delta variant. And we're seeing a ton of, our hospitals are maxed and taxed to the brim. And so what that means that there's a whole new trauma of death and of illness that wasn't seen before, especially with this particular variant hitting younger and younger, population. And so I just kind of want to ask, without engaging into the debate of andragogy versus pedagogy or any of that kind of stuff, but how are you helping your educators remember that you got to put that oxygen mask on first as you come into this, and helping model that example through the fall?
For sure. I think you bring up great points, because I think the expectation was we're going back to normal, and not our new normal, but our old normal, right? Like we're going back to some of our old practices. We were moving things left and right. As a person working in Texas, as we both have known, there's not a whole lot of mandates going on right now. And so I think it was a setup for failure in the sense that everyone thought we didn't have a whole lot to worry about. And quickly we've had to change and shift, and we're still shifting, and we'll continue as the school year goes on, because like you said, hospitals are maxed out. My wife is a nurse, and I get updates all the time she's getting calls every single day to go work and help out as much as possible. And the reason for that is just because of how many people are getting sick. So that's stressful. We've seen more loss within our campus, like for family members and extended family members, than we've ever seen before. And right now, sometimes it feels like the hurt are working with the hurt. And that's a hard place to be at. And so as a leader, we need to make sure that we're providing mental health opportunities. And when I say that, I don't mean like we're going to do an hour-long session on mental health. No, we're going to give you time to take care of mental health. And that's a very, very different thing. And so, time is such a vital piece. Our teachers are overworked more than ever right now. And we've got virtual options, we've got in-person options, both versions. Teachers are working well into the evening and working long extended periods of time to make sure, because now it's not only we're teaching students that are on campus, but we're also teaching students who are quarantining or that have an illness that may last up to a month long. And so that's just a very different model of education, and one that we've never ever had to experience before. So that comes with experimenting, failing. And as we all know, educators don't like to fail. It's not something that we're used to, and many of us haven't experienced that in our past. And so that's really a difficult thing to feel like a failure over and over when the model consistently changes. And so, what are you able to do as a leader to brighten someone's day for 5 minutes, for an hour, like whatever that may be? So, a big thing for us is what are our strengths, but also how do we love each other? Like, how do we enjoy being loved, right? So like, for instance, the 5 languages of love, right? Like, we actually did a survey with our staff. How do you enjoy being recognized, right? Do you love getting gifts? Do you love words of encouragement? Do you love a side hug? Like, it's okay to give someone a side hug if that's the way that they love encouragement. And I think for leaders, we just have to be, we say that for teachers to students. Well, we got to do that for leaders to teachers. How do we know our staff? For us too, it's how do we check in with every single staff member to make sure that things that are going on at home are okay, so that way that stress isn't being brought on. Is there a way that we can help them in other ways than outside of just assessments and grades and textbooks or whatever it may be, right? There's an extended piece there that a lot of times is brought onto the campus, and we don't know about it because we don't ask.
Wow. I mean, so the first thing that popped into my mind was this is an experience of, we're so cognizant of teaching trauma-informed practices, but what happens when the teacher is also experiencing a trauma? And so, I mean, then it's like, then you pass it up, right? To like now to the principal, like, okay, how are you leading through with trauma-informed practices? And I love your comment of not just providing a 60-minute webinar or professional learning experience about it. How are you actually making time for that? So yeah, Lainey, what about?
Well, I mean, I really appreciate, and you referenced it too, Bree, the example of like not a 60-minute webinar. Like, if this is someone who's drowning, don't put more on their plate.
Exactly.
And I really appreciate how you talk about thinking it like through an empathetic lens. Like, what is your love language? What is it that would mean something to you? I think sometimes we tend to, it's like the golden rule. How would you want to be treated? Well, the platinum rule is treating someone how they want to be treated because they may not want to be treated the way that I want to be treated. And so I think that that's really, really important. I I'm going to be taking that with me and thinking more carefully about how do I make sure that I am supporting people in the way that they want and need to be supported, not necessarily just the way that I would want to be supported. I think that's a really good lesson.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up empathy too, because I mean, I wrote about it in my book, and I use that as a characteristic that I'm really passionate about. And because I think empathy is seen as a weakness a lot of times in leadership, and that shouldn't be the case. That should be a strength and something that you try and hone every single day.
It's interesting that you say that. So, big fan of empathy. There's research out there specifically for leaders that the more empathetic you are, most especially if you're a man, the more empathetic you are, the more successful you will be as a leader, because empathy is not something that is innately outwardly expressed as a man. It is for women. And ironically, the more empathetic a woman is, it's not always seen at the same level that it is celebrated in a man. But it is so important to be able to, to pause. And Lainey, I love that you said that, of like the platinum rule, right? Because so much of what we talk about in education is being learner centered, not centering it on what I, as the teacher, want to learn today. It's more, what do my students need? And it's the same thing from that leadership. It's not let me bend the will of all of my team to my certain style. Instead, it's how can I, serve and meet the needs of the staff. I'm reading a book right now that is The Motivation Code by Todd Henry, and I highly recommend it if you haven't checked it out. It's not, when I first, I came across it, I'll be really honest, I was like, oh, yay, it's another one of those, what letters can we say describe you or anything like that? And it's not, it's it really goes into what the two of you were just saying about how do we recognize what fires us up individually, not just our own personal insight, but so when we're working with a team, we can be Susie is really driven off of making sure that she meets this deadline because that's how she shows her commitment and shows her worth and all of this stuff. And she'll do whatever it takes to make that commitment. But this other person might not see that. They're trying really hard to, rein in boundaries, and there's conflict. Not because they're not a good team, but because their motivating factors are a little bit at odds. And so how can you understand the strengths of those motivating factors? And I think that is so important, whether we're looking at our classrooms or our boardrooms or our team, any of that stuff. So
I think you touched on something also about the passion piece. So every person needs to have a passion project within their own world. You talk about mental health, and I think the podcast for me, and to a certain extent, the book, although I don't love writing, which is crazy to say as an author, but the passion project for me was the podcast, right? And without that, I don't think my mental health as a leader would be where it's at, because that experience and that creativity that I'm able to use in that space fills my cup for me to go on to the next day and be the best version for myself, and there's other things obviously that I need also, but I think, teachers and leaders as a whole, or educators, just need to be able to have some time for their passions. And as a leader, I need to know the strengths of my staff and what they're passionate about, so that way I can say yes to the great ideas and the creativity that they have, because I want to motivate them. I want to have that drive. I want them to do something that they love and believe in. And I need to get out of the way of that and give them those opportunities. So I'm just hoping that, this year specifically, I think everybody needs a little bit of opportunity to work on their passions.
I love that. Josh, tell us more about the book, because like I said, I was lucky to get the sneak peek. I'm going to say it's, and I hope you're okay with me saying this, but I really love that it was kind of the emotional side of leadership. It's talking about empathy and passion and creativity. And I just feel like you give us so many good tools. And so if you don't mind, no spoilers necessarily, because we're all going to go get the book. But what brought you to write this book? What are you hoping people walk away with? Kind of this is a passion project for you. So.
Yeah, and it was led because of the podcast, honestly. I had an opportunity to speak with Todd Neslony in Austin, Texas, and I had this crazy idea, and he's kind of my soundboard. I mean, the podcast was something I threw at him, and of course, he ping-ponged it back and was like, I think you should do it. It's an amazing idea. And I did the same thing with the book. And he wrote the foreword to the book. There's no one else I would rather have write the foreword because he's been such a wonderful influence in my life as a friend and then professionally. But really, it came from the idea that as an art teacher to an administrator, I made a lot of ridiculous mistakes. and I wanted to provide a guide for folks and for people to understand, like, everybody is a leader. For one, if you're an educator, you're a leader. You're leading someone. If you're in a building, even as a custodian, you're leading someone somewhere. And I found in my old districts, when I was working on a program to build up leaders, it was for aspiring leaders, that a lot of folks just didn't have a guide. They didn't have support on the campus. They didn't have a mentor. They thought, hey, someday I want to be a leader, but they just didn't have a framework to work in to even understand what that looked like. They didn't know the positions. They didn't know who to talk to, and they were lost. They were just searching. And so I had the wonderful opportunity to just put on these different events with very little advertising for it. And I'd get 175 to 200 people show up on a Thursday night without providing any food or anything.
Wow.
Very little motivation whatsoever. And granted, I've always worked in big districts, but still, the attendance the draw was because people were just hungry. They just wanted information. And so that's what led me to the podcast, because the district took that program over, and I still was just longing to help other people. And that's really what I want the book to be. I use Aspire as an acronym. So it's activate, support, persevere, identify, reflect, and execute. And just ways to show all of my mistakes. I want to be very vulnerable and transparent with my stories of I was not perfect. I've had successes, obviously, because I got into the role that I wanted, but it came with some very tough lessons. And hopefully people can read the stories and resonate with them to understand maybe this is a pitfall that I don't need to walk into to make my journey a little bit easier and to be successful with the specific tools that are laid out for creativity, passion, and empathy, which are three characteristics I just think every leader needs to possess.
Absolutely. So I have to vouch for the vulnerability, and I so appreciate that. I'm guessing Bree is with me on this, that I would much rather learn from someone who's willing to reveal their mistakes to me than someone who's I nailed it. And, as an administrator, I think one of the hardest things is when you're a teacher, they don't teach you everything in teacher school. Your teacher prep program isn't going to cover everything, but you tend to learn your mistakes in front of children who don't rat you out. So it's kind of you're learning as you're going, but you're not necessarily having an audience for that. Whereas when you move into administration, you tend to have a bigger audience for your mistakes. And so that can be really stifling and really scary for people. And so I'm always really grateful when people give, like I said, the tools that you give, the framework to help us get through that. So just wanted to acknowledge that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I mean, just for what it's worth, I love that you've chosen Aspire, not just for the acronym, but also, I mean, the root of it actually means to breathe out, right? And so you're breathing out this information that can be, it's this exhale of what you have processed, what you've, experienced and all of that. And I love that. I think that is so very valuable, because even if you nail it, on the first try, your hope is that the next time you nail it even better, right? It's that, or you're going to experience something and then wonder, what the heck? Why didn't I get the same experience that I had the first time? And so I think that it's just that reminder that just like we breathe in and breathe out, we never stop that. We can't ever stop the learning and the leading as we go through time. So I'm really excited to read the book. So yeah.
Well, thank you both. Yeah, it was a fun experience. Obviously, it was a challenging task, but I definitely wanted it. Everyone's going to go through challenging times. As a leader, as an administrator, that's going to happen. I mean, today was a very rough day. I won't go into specifics, but I am spent. But because of that experience that I went through today, I will be a better leader tomorrow. And, we have to realize that we're not going to be perfect. We're going to have some times where we feel like a failure or that we didn't make a difference, but I promise you that you are making a difference every single day. And a lot of times we don't see the evidence of it until farther down the pathway, right? Maybe the day a child graduates from school and goes to college is the time, and it might be 6 years later, it might be 8 years later that you see how you impact that life. And that's the really difficult thing about being an educator in general, is we don't get those opportunities to see the difference until much, much later.
So Josh, tell us a little bit about the podcast, because we've only kind of really kind of touched on it briefly, but there's such a strong connection between the book and the podcast. And I know that you've done the podcast for years, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's been over 3 years now. Yeah, it's that's crazy.
I know. And so, Bree and I, we're here on Lemonade Learning and have only done like a year and some change.
Yeah, year and some change, year plus. Yeah.
and
we're toddlers. We're toddlers in this journey. So.
Yeah. Season 2, the toddler years. So I mean, we've learned a lot. But yeah, just tell us a little bit about your podcast and kind of maybe what you've learned and what maybe people have shared that you thought was really, really helpful. And I really do hope people will check out your podcast, because you have a lot of really awesome people on there. And
it's been crazy. Yeah, it's been something I just never imagined, honestly, when I started. I mentioned Todd Neslony. I went down to visit him when he was working as a principal in Nova Soda, and I happened to come in when him and Adam Welcome were doing the Kids Deserve It podcast, and I kind of snuck in the background and just kind of watched the magic as it was unfolding. And once he was done, I just shot like 1,000 questions at him, because I was like, what is this? Because podcast for me, I was already a podcast listener, but it was just for sports. I mean, as you can see behind me, I've got like all the sports memorabilia. I'm kind of a nut. So that was like my only world of podcasting. I didn't even realize that other things existed in that space. And so then, talking with him, and I kind of shared my experience at that time. I was longing to do something with aspiring leadership. I wanted to help other people. And that's always been my mission. I don't get paid in any sort of way for the podcast. This is literally me just loving to talk one with people, to learn, and then share that information in hopes that it helps someone in their leadership journey, wherever you may be. And that's really been my mission this whole time. So I have been so fortunate to talk to so many different leaders. I'm on 162 interviews. I do a couple different variations within the podcast with the Teach Better team. I'm the podcast network manager for them. So I've had the honor of working with Jeff Gargis, doing the Aspire mailbag. So we have questions brought in, and then we answer it, and we bring on guests too. And that's a lot of fun. It's a little more relaxed as we joke around a lot. And then also I do something with Sarah Johnson where we do more of a coaching model, Aspire to Rise. And so every month, me and Sarah have an aspiring leader where they have a problem that they share to us, and we kind of coach them through that. And by no means do we give them answers, but we, give them some coaching questions for them to kind of work through. And then we also give them some resources in hopes that, they'll kind of work through that, but then also get to that next level that they want to aspire to. So as far as guests and wisdom, I think of it as exercise, but not exercise of the body, it's exercise of the mind. And I say that because every time it's about this time at night, I get the kids to bed, I'm exhausted. I'm like, man, do I really need to do this again? I sit down and I go through the interview, and I'm just so energized and inspired at the end. And I'm so glad I've had the opportunity to sit down with some amazing leader that has spoken wisdom into my own life. And I know has spoken wisdom into people across the world. So it's really hard after over 200 some episodes with those 3 different categories to kind of hone in. But I will say to have Todd Whitaker and I'm trying to think, Eric Schinniger I just had on, Thomas Murray. I mean, just some of these Jimmy Casas, like.
Wait, you're not allowed to say
amazing.
Tom Murray on this podcast. His name has been said too many times on this podcast.
Apparently you have to pay a fine. We're going to have to start
It's like a swear jar? Is that
It's
what
like
it
a
is?
swear jar.
We're trying to decide between a swear jar or is he going to get royalties? Because people just keep name dropping him and we're going to
I voted drinking game for the record, but.
I mean, he was just at my campus. So, I mean.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think, were you guys at Cowboys Stadium or something like that?
The practice facility. Yeah. He spoke to our entire district. So it was a big time. But then
thank you, Josh. It was the practice facility. I love that. It's like, not the stadium. Let's bring him down, bring him into, kind of reel him in just a tiny bit. I mean, still really super impressive.
This is very impressive.
Yeah.
Well, so I really appreciate what you're saying, Josh. And we've talked about this on this podcast before. You don't have to write a book. You don't have to do a podcast. You don't have to do anything in particular, but that process of reflecting is super important. And I think that that's what comes from however you want to express your thinking. It's reflecting, right? And, I get to, all three of us, we have this podcast, or we have, you have your own podcast, we have this podcast, and we listen to the episodes. So we're in the moment, we're having this conversation, and then we go back and we listen to them. And that's our opportunity to reflect. And so I think that's a really special thing. I've grown tremendously because of it. So I don't know.
Well, and I think it comes back to what you were sharing at the beginning of, one of the biggest gifts that we can give to our students and to our staff right now and to each other is seeing them, that gift of being seen, and that gift of listening, and that gift of validating that they are a human being who is doing the best that they can and is, working towards a better situation. Right. And I think that one of the things, whether you're a coach, whether you're in remote learning, whether you are, a fifth grade teacher that is by himself while, with his 22 kids, it can feel very, very isolating and in every way, whether it's as a parent, whether it's as a student, whether it's as a teacher, somebody is telling you you're not doing it right. Right. Whether it's your own child, whether, somehow you are falling into a struggle, and then to be able to connect with people, right? Whether it's reading, a post that somebody did and just reflecting on that and kind of marinating on it and going, oh, wow, that reminds me of this experience that I just had. And I'm going to try that tomorrow and see if that helps me. Or whether it's verbally having these conversations, through a podcast. I think it's that piece that we really, really need right now is to be able to have that reflective validation with our network and know that we're all together in some form or fashion.
For sure. Yeah. And a lot of times folks just don't have opportunities to learn. And that was the main thing, is I want to provide you value that you may not get somewhere else. I mean, how often do you get to listen to some of these folks pour out in a 30-minute section to maybe speak specifically to you to help you obtain your goals? And I had that personally. I had the support on my campus, that I had an amazing assistant principal. I had amazing leaders to give me guidance. And I know for a fact that there's a lot of folks that don't have that opportunity. So I was hoping through this process that at least I could give them some support through maybe a drive to work, or, a little piece of advice, a little inspiration, to get them so that they can work through these steps to hopefully obtain whatever goals they may have in their leadership journey.
So I'm going to ask a question that I don't think we've really covered specifically. We've talked about supporting our kids. We've talked about supporting our teachers. How and it's okay if you don't have an answer for this, but I'm also thinking about our leaders. And how do they support each other? How do they, find support? I do think your podcast is helpful, because that can be for the principal that's kind of on an island, and they can kind of feel like, okay, well, this is where I can connect and really hear how someone else is working through the problems that I'm having. But I wondered if there's anything that's happening that you're aware of to kind of really help the leaders who You know, they've got COVID renting a room in their head. They've got maybe more than one room. I mean, they've just got so much on their shoulders. And I feel like, how do we help them? Because it's a lot.
It is a lot. I think Bree talked about it earlier about a network, right? I think all of us, all three of us, have a solid network that we can lean on daily that is going to support us in any situation. So social media obviously is one piece of the pie of getting to know people and building relationships. And I know like my family doesn't understand how I have like really amazing friendships with people that I've never met ever. And it's kind of mind boggling. And I have extremely deep relationships with them. I know their families, I know what's going on in their daily lives. And it's a weird concept, but without that support and that network, I don't know if I could get through a year like I just had with COVID and all the changes. And I think that's something that educators just don't understand, like the power of that. I know a lot of people speak about it. Like for instance, George Couros, one of the first people that I saw in a conference, asked about social media, who is on Twitter, right? A lot of speakers do this, and maybe 20% or lower is raising their hands. And for me personally, at the time when I heard him speak the first time, I didn't raise my hand. I didn't think there was any reason for that. Obviously now it's something that is a huge piece of my life. But because of that one speech, I was able to then grow a network that isn't about like supporting a podcast. It's not supporting a book. It's about supporting me as a human being and as a leader. And I think that's more important than anything else. The other piece is like on my campus, I have people where if I'm having a tough day, I can shut the door and speak freely and know that it's not going to go outside of this room, that I can vent, say whatever I need to say, get off my chest, and then it's done and it's out in the world and I can move on and go about my day. I have an amazing support system with my family. Like I am very intentional about like, when is my day as a school leader? When is my day as a father? When is my day as a husband? And I think for me, being very intentional about my time is a must. If I don't have that, then things start to fall to the wayside. My mental health falls to the wayside, or my responsibilities. If I spend too much time, and granted, there are certain days that I have to be unbalanced, right? Like the day when my book launches, I can tell you I'm going to be probably all focused on that and not focused on anything else, right? So there are certain times where we have to be unbalanced, but we have to be consistent. And we have to make sure that, I think of it kind of like the metaphor of like the person that's spinning plates on those sticks, right? You go to a halftime show and someone's doing the trick of spinning all these different plates. Well, what happens if you don't touch one of those plates? It's going to fall on the ground, right? Now, does that mean that I have to be intentional about spinning it constantly? No, but I might have to touch it at least, right? So whatever those plates might be, we need to identify them. And then we also need to make sure that we're planning our time so that we are not letting anything drop, but they're still important. And I think mental health is one of those things. So for instance, for me, creating is something I have to do. When I create, I am a better person. I'm a more healthy person. I have a better mindset. So how is that one of my plates? Where am I designating my time to make sure I'm creating? Exercise is so important, and for our mental health too, right? So if that's important, how am I designating my time for that? And I can go on to a long list, but I think as leaders, as educators, we just need to make sure that we know what's important in our life and what's going to make us the best person. And then how are we identifying where we're putting our time toward that? As leaders, we have to make sure we give that time too.
Yeah. So I want to kind of piggyback into that statement. As a leader, what are some suggestions? You've been, you're a month-ish into this year. What were some things as someone with a very strong focus on trauma-informed practices and SEL? What were some things that you were very intentional to do with your staff? Like, can you give us some really strong nuggets of like, what were things, not just like, yep, told them it was important, but what did you do? You said you shared that you did the 5 languages of love, which if our audience doesn't know, there's actually one specifically for work that's out there, and it's not like it's side hugs and high fives. It's not inappropriate, anything like that. But what are some things that you've done that you're feeling are helpful?
Yeah, so for us, we wanted to model what we expected for them to do with their students. And being on a campus for, this will be my 4th year, they've heard me speak a lot about trauma-informed practices. They've heard about social emotional learning, how important that is. But, you know, every year it's whoever the speakers are, or whoever we bring in. Like we had Nathan Maynard last year, is kind of like our person that was working through mindfulness, right? And giving them strategies to be able to provide that at home, and breathing exercises. Obviously, he knew that everyone's going through stressful situations. So how are we teaching our staff to be mindful and to take care of themselves if they were triggered? You know, how are they able to regulate themselves? You know, really digging in and giving those tools to our teachers to utilize and actually do themselves. So that way, when a student's doing it, hey, this has worked for me. Please try X, Y, and Z to maybe regulate yourself. But then for us, like we took a retreat. We went out. Thankfully, our principal knew someone that gave us an amazing deal. They had kind of a ranch style situation. We were able to like bring our staff to a barn, but the whole day wasn't about us just giving more information, right? We're always great as districts, just pump in knowledge, right? Knowledge, but we never give them the time to actually use the skills that we provide. And that day was just about building relationships, getting to know each other. And so we did a lot of stations and activities and just having fun, like get to know each other as people. We're obviously going to go through really tough times, and we're going to need to be able to support each other. If someone gets sick, if someone has a spouse that loses a job, like whatever maybe someone goes through a divorce, whatever it may be, like who's got your back? And you're not going to have someone's back if you don't know them. That's just how it is. And so we've got new folks on our teams, like who are they as people? And so we spent an entire day, so literally 8 hours of just getting to know each other as a team and doing team building activities. I know sometimes that word doesn't have weight, but we were actually using strategies that we were like, hey, you've just now done a relationship circle. You didn't realize it, or this was a brain break that you can use in the classroom. So everything that we did was something that we were modeling that they could actually use within their instructional day.
I love it. I mean, because again, kind of coming back to that circle of everyone, I mean, for a large majority of our schools, there's been a year apart, in some form or fashion. And so, that's news outlets all across are talking about that. We used to be able to run into each other at the copy machine or the water cooler or, faculty meeting, like all of those kind of things. And while some of those routines have been virtualized, there's also been a lot of elements that have gone missing from that. And so giving that time to reconnect or to connect, whether it's new staff or staff that's been together before, is super important. And to not, sweep that under the rug and to be intentional, I think is a great reminder. Because again, like that seems to be a recurring theme this year that I'm hearing all across the country is, don't forget, we've got to build those relationships. Relationships are more important than ever. We really have to do that. Like, let's not, don't be so quick to jump full on into content only. Lay those relationships ahead of time. And what a fantastic reminder that, you don't have to jump into the handbook discussion straight away. Like you don't have to do that. We can build time. Yes, everybody's got lots of things that are on their mind, but if you build in and are very intentional about it, you're going to get a better response from your team. Because just like our students know when we kind of phone it in as a teacher on these practices, we also know that when from a leadership, it's just kind of like, yep, we're going to do this icebreaker to check the list. It sounds like you guys were really intentional in that way. So I appreciate those recommendations.
Well, just like the PD, right? I mean, we say, be engaging and facilitate the learning. And then we go and we give like a 3-hour PowerPoint of 62 slides. I mean, and we model the exact opposite that we want the teachers to do in the classroom. So we wanted to make sure that we were intentional, like you said, of modeling exactly what we expect in the classroom with our students.
Well, and it sounds like you gave them a lot of options. I think one thing that kind of is just my personal takeaway when I started to be super intentional with sharing SEL practices with educators, and someone even explicitly said this to me, one of my colleagues at Orange County Department of Ed, said, not every SEL practice is right for everyone. And so there might be things that as a teacher, I'm not comfortable doing with my students. Well, maybe I'll give it to them as a tool and they can do it on their own. But maybe I will lead with my group this activity that I am comfortable doing and leading. And so I think that the more that you can give them those options, that variety, and actually experience it themselves, the more comfortable they're going to feel putting it into practice. So I love that. So we have to start to wrap up. I'm like just now noticing the clock. So Josh, we'll give you a chance for any final thoughts that you want to share, but I want to make sure people are aware if in case they like somehow skipped ahead and didn't hear this, but Aspire to Lead is going to go on pre-order September 7th, if I got that correct.
Yeah,
so for people who, if you're listening to this, it should be after that. Post-production hope. And then, so you can go get the pre-order and then the official launch, I think you said September 21st, right?
Yes. You're right on.
Good with my date.
Yep, September 21st. You're great.
And then you should definitely check out the Aspire podcast. Josh, I just want to say that I have been so lucky to get to know you recently. And I don't know how long you and Bree have known each other, probably longer. It seems like everyone always knows Bree longer than me. I'm just so jealous. But my experience with you is that you are super authentic, just a really genuinely good person who's doing the very best for lots of people. And so I just want you to know how much I appreciate your work. I was very grateful to be on your podcast. And up next, I'm the opening. And Bree's the closer. She's going to come in next. And that's the order. Very excited about that. Bree, any final thoughts? And then we'll toss to Josh for any of his final thoughts and his socials that he wants to share so people can make sure to find him.
Yeah, no, I mean, I very much enjoyed this episode. I think that it is so incredibly timely. Lainey and I always talk about, we try to keep our conversations as both in the moment and evergreen as possible, if that's kind of if it's available out there. We try to not wrap it to specifically COVID type conversations, but at the same time, like I think it's also timely to say, we all are, and I know this phrase has been thrown around a lot, of the we're in the same ocean. We don't have the same boat, but we're all really dealing with this in so many different ways. And it's that common constraint of uncertainty and trauma. And I think that again, I think that's also one of those Princess Bride words that a lot of times we throw around trauma. And before 2019, 2020, we really associated trauma with like death and violence and things of a true epic proportion, which I think we're obviously seeing right now as well. But it's gone from trauma being almost kind of an exception to the circumstance to now really seeing trauma being processed at differing levels for everyone. And so I think that I'm just really grateful to you for sharing so many authentic and transparent and vulnerable tips around how to manage this. I was thinking when you were talking earlier and you were saying, that you don't claim to be perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But I think that you claim to be a practitioner. And I think that that's the most important part, is that you are a working practitioner. You're not a one and done expert. And I think that that's my takeaway, is to just keep practicing it constantly.
Definitely. And I agree with both of you. I know the evergreen piece, trauma existed well before COVID. COVID just put it in our face and didn't let us look around it. And before, studies showed that almost 70% of every single human being in the world had at least one form of trauma. That means that it's not the minority. Trauma is the majority at this point. So we need to make sure that we have the skills to handle it. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. It's in front of us every single day. And the way that we used to practice how we interacted and communicated with other people, thinking that everybody lived in this wonderful home with two parents and had food on the table every single night. I mean, that's not the majority of experiences. And so as a school, we need to be a safe place. And that goes from the kids to the adults. And I just think this topic is, yes, it's relevant now, but it's going to be relevant for all time. I mean, we just need to make sure that everybody is safe and that they have the resources that they need to be successful and to be able to learn.
Well, Josh, you have so much more to share. So tell us about the ways that people can connect with you afterwards. They obviously should get your book and listen to your podcast. And then what's the socials? We'll have it for we don't really advertise the video component of this podcast. So it has a lot of listeners comparatively. So we'll have it on a frame for the people who do watch the video, both of them. But for the vast majority who will be listening, could you tell us your handles and all that fun stuff?
Definitely. They're going to miss me dancing and singing the entire time. That's crazy. They definitely need to watch
Spinning
the video.
plates. You were spinning
spinning plates. I had the whole thing down. So social media on Twitter and Instagram, it's Joshua _Stamper. You got to be intentional about those 2 double underscores, or it goes to someone else. And then as far as the website, it's joshstamper.com. There's obviously my podcast. There's some blogs on there. There's some other resources. And of course, the book will be on there too for purchase. So I would love it if you picked up a copy or listened to the Aspire podcast. Definitely check out Lainey's episode. She was amazing on there. And pretty soon I'm going to have Bree on. She's going to rock the mic. We're going to flip the script. It's going to be awesome.
See, I was intentional to not like set myself up to get grilled or anything. So you got to play nice.
I will. I promise.
Josh is an amazing host. Seriously, just one of the most generous people I've had the pleasure of collaborating with. So thank you both for being here, and thank you to all of our listeners, and we'll catch up soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this batch of Lemonade Learning, please check out our website, lemonadelearning.us, for more resources. Be sure to subscribe today so you don't miss out on future lessons, laughter, or lemonade.
And if you're feeling really generous, please go to Apple Podcasts to submit a review so other educators know the value. One last thing, Learning and Lemonade are best together. So please connect with us on social media using the hashtag Lemonade Learning to share your story. Plus, we're always looking to give away stickers and swag.